Welcome back, everyone. I'm Artie Merritt, the BD Go-to-Market Specialist for Bedrock here on the West Coast. We're excited to do Mission 4 of AgentCore Academy, License to Scale. This one is 4-year MCP only. And as mentioned, I'm Artie, and I'm here with my teammate, John. Sorry.
Hey everyone,
Yeah.
Jean-Malain, Specialist Solutions Architect covering Amazon Bedrock and Agent Core for startups here in uh, San Francisco.
All right, so just as a quick reminder, uh, part of the reason for building out AgentCore is you really want AWS to be the best place for your agentic AI workloads, and that's how we came up with AgentCore. And just as a quick overview for folks who might have missed the others or refresher on the previous missions that we had, Agent Core is really a set of components or primitives that makes it easier to build, deploy, maintain agentic AI in a highly scalable way. And one of those components is our runtime environment. And that's really where you're hosting the agent, and you can use whichever frameworks you like. You can use our Strands agents, you can use LangGraph, Crew AI, your own homegrown solution. You can use Bedrock models, other models from other model providers, and we handle all the scaling. You just containerize your agent up, and then we'll do all the scaling from there. The next component we have is our gateway, and that's for tool calling. We have some built-in integrations with like Salesforce, Zendesk, some other providers. You can do Lambda functions, REST APIs. We have some built-in tools of our own. One of those is a code interpreter, which is effectively a sandbox for running code, so you can prevent anything malicious happening to the rest of your environment. There's a browser tool as well, and this is basically interacting with the browser much like a human would. And we even have our own model around that called Nova Act. There's Agent Core Identity. This is the authentication into the agent as well as the authentication out to those other services that you're interacting with, and we can handle that delegation, passing that along. Agent Core Memory is the both the short-term contextual memory that agent interactions back and forth, as well as the long-term memory. And there you can have summarization, user preferences, semantic memory. There's a couple different strategies for storing long term. And lastly, across all of this is a level of observability. And you can dive deeper into seeing token usage, how the agent's interacting, and it all supports open telemetry protocol. So you can ingest this data in different BI tools that support OTel as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jean to dive deeper into MCP today.
All right, so perfect. Thank you, Artie. I think that was a great way to get us started. I'm going to show you a few ways of hosting MCP servers into Amazon Agent Core. If Amazon Bedrock Agent Core. If you look into the different solutions, you'll see that, well, the first and easiest way of presenting things like an MCP server is going to use our gateway. So you can think of gateway as a serverless offering that gives you an MCP interface in front of whichever solutions you have on the back end. So we really got started with hosting REST APIs, Lambda functions, and we're going in the very near future to add the ability to call an MCP server so that you can aggregate things on the MCP side. But the first thing we're going to do is basically we're going to define a gateway, and our gateway is going to present a set of APIs that are protected by an API key. So we need to define the inbound authentication, which is going to be an OAuth-based authentication. We're going to define the outbound authentication, which in our case is going to be a static API key. And we're going to be able to consume that without having to define any servers. So how do we get started from that? It's actually pretty easy. The first thing we need to do is have an OAuth provider. If you don't have one, you can use Cognito. Cognito is OAuth compatible identity provider that you can deploy in AWS. It's fully serverless. So here, what I'm doing is I'm just creating an OAuth provider that's going to have client ID where I can create bearer tokens that then I can use for the authentication into my gateway And you can see that here it gives me my client ID and the URL for my OpenID configuration, so I can use that from any application really. Then the second step is going to be creating the actual gateway. So AgentCore Gateway is a serverless offering. It is going to present an HTTP streamable endpoint so that you will be able to use from your MCP client. And you don't need, again, to pay for the servers if you're not doing any requests to them. So that makes it very economical if you have a lot of different MCP servers that you need to present to different audiences. You can also define your authorization so that it limits the client IDs and or the audiences that are allowed to access your MCP server. Once we're done with that, I'm going to show you what it actually looks like in the console, by the way. So if I go into AgentCore, oh, sorry, I want to go into AgentCore here. So I'm going to go in the console. If you're not familiar with the AWS console, this is super simple to get to. You can get to Bedrock Agent Core. You can see all of our um, primitives that are available here on the left side. And let's start with Gateway. So here for Gateway, I actually have one demonstration already created, and I've created the code I've shown you is the code that I executed just to create that gateway. It gives me, hey, how should I invoke, like using a specific MCP client, or can I connect to it using MCP inspector? By the way, I have it running right here. So here, if I define with my bearer and everything, and if I connect, I'm going to be able to interact with my MCP server. All right, going back here. My MCP server also has targets, and we're going to go through how we define the targets afterwards. But really, my targets are going to be all of the tools that I want to present through that particular MCP server with the definition of the tools. And here, let's start with an Open API specification. So to do that, we're going to create so the first thing we need to do is make sure that we have a way to authenticate. So to authenticate, we need to provide the secret, the API key, or the OAuth token to our agents at runtime. And we can do that by just creating uh, um, Bedrock Agent Core identity element. I'm going to show you that here. So if I go into identity, what I've created is my API key. And it's actually stored in Secret Manager. That means it's never stored in clear, and it is only accessed by the resources that are allowed to access it at runtime. It's a great way to make sure that you maintain your security posture throughout the communication between your client and the MCP server, and then your MCP server and the resources that it can access on the back end. So we've defined that in a super simple way here. I've provided my API key. Obviously, my API key here is I'm sending it to the Agent Core Identity Service once in clear. I would strongly recommend not doing that hard coded in your code, but that is just a demonstration of how to do that. And here you can see that I have my object. That's what I showed you in the console. Now, once I've done that, what I can do is create the Open API schema that's going to be used by my MCP server to present the tools that are going to be used. So what I do there is I just take my Open API specification. So here I'm taking the one of the Open APIs from NASA, the Insights Moth Weather Service API, and it has its own definition. It has everything presented here, and it has the Open API spec. So I'm just going to upload that Open API spec to an S3 bucket. And once I have it on my S3 bucket, I'm going to be able to define, hey, this is going to be my target for my MCP server. And here I define my OpenAPI schema with the URI of where I uploaded it on S3. And then I tell Agent Core Gateway, how it's going to access to the underlying REST API on the back end. And here I'm going to tell it, well, you're going to use credential parameter, the API key that I created before, with these parameters, and then you're going to be able to call it. Once I have that, it's pretty much done. So if I go back into Gateway, once I've run through all of that, I'm able to do here, I have my target, and my target is just exactly that, an open API schema. I can use that now from any MCP client. So I was showing you, hey, I have it connected through my MCP inspector there, so I can use my tool. I can use version 1 of my tool. I can use JSON as a feed type. And I can ask questions about what's the weather currently in Mars, which is super interesting. But I really don't want to do that manually most of the time. I want to make sure that I can consume my MCP server from an agent, and that can be done. So just to go back there, all of this configuration, I could do that in Cursor, I could do that in Kiro, I could do that in Amazon Q, and I could have that particular tool available within my development environment, or I can provide that as a tool, as the definition of the tools within my agents. And that's what I've done in the next step. So here we can create uh, an agent. So that's going to be, I'm going to rerun this so that I have like a refresh token, but I'm creating a refresh token there. I have the URL for my MCP server. So you can see that my URL is here, and it is dedicated to that specific MCP gateways that I have created. And now I can create an agent. Let's imagine I create an agent using our Amazon Nova Pro, and I'm going to give it the definition of the tools here. I give it my client, and I give that as a tool to my client, and I'm going to ask it, well, what's currently the weather at Insights Landers location in Mars, on Mars? And here I can see that my agent is looking for the get insight weather data. It is pretty cold currently. The air temperature is minus 95 Celsius. Yeah, and I can see that there are a pretty decent winds just right there. And this can be used directly from my agent. So what's really interesting there is I have created a fully serverless way of serving that particular API in an MCP format without having to write a line of code, really. And that gives me a super simple way of creating of adding logic from my REST APIs, whether they're defined in Open API specification or they're defined in Smithy, and I can bring that back into any agentic solutions, whether my user interactive solutions like my IDE or my agents without having to recreate new things. Now, the second step of what we could do is if we see that we don't necessarily have an API or our API is not completely intelligible for a solution for our solution to be able to consume it or for the agents to be able to understand it well, what we can do is rather than have an open API schema on the back end, we can have Lambda functions. And the Lambda functions there are going to be so if we take the example of what we were doing before, if I compare the first one and the second one, here you can see that the main difference is going to be in the outbound authentication and in the custom logic. So if I go here, you can see that I'm going to have my inbound authentication exactly the same. For my outbound authentication, well, I don't need to go through an API, a specific API, because I'm using Lambda functions. Obviously, my Lambda functions could access the secret that I've defined before if they need to call an API on their own, but that's not required because I have an identity and access management execution role, so I can do a much stronger authentication slash authorization to allow my Lambda functions to execute any tool that I want to define. And here, well, the first steps are going to be exactly the same. I create my user pool for my inbound authentication. Then I create my, uh, so, I need to have a Lambda function, and my Lambda function is going to be defined as a target. So my target here, I need to define my configuration that says, hey, this is what I'm going to take as an input. This is what I'm going to take as an output. And then I can use it within um, within an agent exactly the same way. So what I want,
Jean,
yes.
Jean, there's one question. Are there any specific requirements on a custom API in order for it to be accessible by an agent?
Are there any requirements on a custom API in order for them to be available by an agent through the MCP gateway? Um, Not really. As long as the definition, the OpenAPI specification is valid, we should be able to present it. But it should be a REST endpoint. Like we're not looking right now to do things with streaming uh, um, on the back end. But I would love to understand where the question comes from. Do you have anything specific in mind?
No, I was just thinking in general, like, if you have to write a custom API, you're saying as long as it conforms with, say, an open API schema, it's gonna work.
It should work, yes. I I don't have something specific in mind that would break it other than, oh, I want to have like a WebSocket and just wait for the WebSocket to provide me things. Yeah, no, we're not going to maintain a WebSocket specifically for an MCP server. We want this to be as loosely coupled as possible, so that wouldn't work. But everything else should be pretty straightforward.
Are there, for example, requirements on the size of data that can be communicated?
Absolutely. So here we do have some limits on the amount of data that we can send and receive. However, as far as I've worked with customers so far, these requirements are way lower than what the average or maybe even the biggest foundation models can do in terms of input and output context anyway.
Got it. Cool.
Like the maximum token context size that you can have as an input in a model right now is like you have edge models that can go above 1 million, but 1 million is kind of uh, uh, um, uh, the upper edge. Um, we support that, no problem. So we can feel the context of the models as part of the input or the output of the um, of the request. All right. I want to show maybe quickly the Lambda function, what it looks like. In the end, the Lambda function can be extremely simple. You're defining the schema in the definition of the target. So how you expect things to be requested, which will be sent back to your MCP client, and then how you expect the answers to be. And usually it's a JSON document that has the information that should be provided. So here we have a very, very small example that allows you to do a super simple tool that gives you like just a number of orders, and we've hard coded the responses there. But if you have custom logic, this is where you would implement it. So the benefit of doing that, and in terms of complexity, I would always start with, hey, I have APIs that I want to feed to models and I want to make that super simple. I would start with Gateway with the open API specification as the input. Then if that doesn't work because I need to add custom logic, I need to ingest data, or I have a very custom authentication scheme that doesn't work with auth or an API key, then I'm going to use a Lambda function. However, there are cases where you want to have even more control over how your MCP server is executing. And in these cases, we still have an option for you. And that option will be to not use gateway anymore, but to start using runtime. I know when we were describing the primitives before, we we say that runtime is here to help you run agents, and it's exactly what it's supposed to do most of the time. You're going to invoke a runtime, it's going to run the agent, it can run for up to 8 hours, and then it's going to die. And it does session isolation, it does everything else. However, you can also create a runtime in what we call MCP mode. In this MCP mode, what the container within the runtime is going to do is serve an MCP server. So that means if you have a fast MCP server that you've created and that you want to use exactly as it is because there's custom logic and it serves in a very specific way, well, you can still import it into AgentCore and use it without having to deploy any infrastructure with all the benefits of AgentCore. So I can run you through how to do that and what would be and what the benefits will be there. So here, this is going to be my MCP server. I've created my MCP server. I'm very proud of my MCP server. It can do addition, it can do multiplication, and it can say hello. It's very custom tools that I've created here, so I really don't want to show that through Lambda functions. I want that to be executed in runtime. So what I'm going to do first is, well, I can test it locally. Testing it locally is really not a problem. One of the things there is when I test it locally, when I define my server here, I haven't defined any authentication/authorization. So that means if I run this on on my own machine, anyone who has access to the port that I'm exposing is going to be able to consume my server. By moving on to AgentCore runtime, I can implement authentication without actually having to implement authentication on my own. So we're going to do exactly the same thing that as we did before. We're going to create an OAuth authentication/authorization flow there. And to do that, well, I'm going to create um, uh, an Cognito user pool, just like for the other ones. And then we're going to deploy our AgentCore runtime MCP server as an agent in AgentCore runtime. This is done super easily if you want to use our starter toolkit. So the starter toolkit does a lot of things for you. So you can import it, and as you can see here, the only thing I'm doing is I'm saying, well, configure it, and it gives me it does all of the preparation of creating my runtime. And then when I do a launch, what it's going to do is it's going to take everything that I've done in configuration, so my Docker file, all of the configuration, everything else, build my Docker file into an image, send it to the ECR repository using AWS code build, and then create my runtime that is going to call that particular container. You don't have to use the starter toolkit. All of that can be done through your favorite CI/CD pipeline. It works really well with GitHub Actions. Happy to help anyone set up this type um, of deployment mechanism. Really, no magic behind it. What it does is we take the Docker file, we create the image, we upload the image to a registry, and then we create the runtime on your AgentCore console. So very easy to set up. You can see here it creates my repository, creates my execution role, then it waits for the execution to happen, it does the build, it makes sure that my image is okay, uploads it, and then creates my agent. So if I go back to uh, the AgentCore console here, I can see that now I have my MCP server. And my MCP server is using the ECR, so the container image that I've created before, which basically uses the code that I've shown you just above. And it has a version and it has an endpoint. What's interesting to note is that once I have that, I actually have the possibility. So if I check my status, I can check my status again, and it tells me that it is ready. Now that I have that, I can actually directly call my my agent using the URL that is specific to that runtime in an MCP way. So if I have an MCP client, I'm going to test my MCP client here with my MCP client. Oh, cool. It's telling me that I have not correctly. It's always, I do exactly the same stupid thing every time. I don't prepare my bearer to refresh it. So that's perfectly fine. I just need to refresh my token. What I've done basically is I've expired my token. Um, Let me refresh my token for sure. Or I'm going to create a new one, by the way. Like we can create a new server. Like the only thing I would need to do there is make sure that I've set up my cognito. I'm going to do a refresh of my cognito. My cognito user pool is already set up. I have my bearer token here. And I need to refresh it. Any questions so far? I have a I'm I got my my bearer token expired. That's pretty much the only issue I have here. But if you have any question while I'm fixing that, I'm happy to answer any question. I'm actually going to deploy something new. That way you guys can see how fast it is to deploy something completely new.
So when you defined, you had like add, multiply, these
Yeah.
functions that are in your these functions are hosted in your MCP server.
Yes.
So if you included, if you imported a lot of other things, if you had more complicated functions, would all of that, are there any, like limitations on the kind of tools that you can put on the server? Um, can they be fairly complex if needed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We can add an additional. All right, we're overwriting. So here,
And are there any limitations in the sense that, like, do they have to return, can they return any object type, or is it?
uh, right now they need to return JSON. What type of objects would you like to return?
I'm just wondering in general, it's like, do you have to, so if you serialize whatever your output is, it should be okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It needs to be like it needs to comply to the MCP specification. One of the things that would be hard to do would be things like MCP elucidations. That is not something that we support right out of the box, but everything around tool use should be absolutely um, like absolutely not a problem to create.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to configure new, create a new one. I'm creating a new MCP server. And really our objective is to make that as seamless as possible so you can focus on the functional. Like, we don't want you to have to host MCP servers on your own where you'll have to maintain all the operating system, the uh, stay up to date with the protocol, all of that we can take away from you and you can focus on building out the agents that actually consume these MCP servers without having to do all of the rest. All right, cool. my launch is complete. If I look at my runtimes, I have my new agent right here. And I'm going to check my status. It is ready. All right. So here, once I have a valid bearer, you can see that I can connect. I can list my tool, and I have my division, which I'm not sure that's how you write divide. Like that is, it's all right.
It's
Well,
a I.
it's an I, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like and like I would blame that on being French, but it's also an I in French. So
Oh,
oh,
that's why I didn't say. I thought maybe it was a French.
no, it isn't. It's a me thing. Like the problem is strictly between the keyboard and the chair on this one. But yeah, we can test the invocation of our different tools there. And it's testing my addition, it's testing my multiplication. I mean, I could modify my code the to also test my division, even if it's like stupidly written. But you can see that the tool is here and it's available, and it's the one that we've described before. So I could have it updated, absolutely no problem. And I'm going to correct it. So division. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, that hurts your eyes a bit less. We're gonna update it. And then we're going to test it.
So is this approach preferred over, for example, the last week's Kiro type of?
Last week's discussion was really all about consuming your MCP servers more than presenting them. Today we're talking really strictly about, hey, you need to host MCP servers, whether it's for Kiro or for something else.
Mhm.
The hosting discussion, everything that we've shown today should absolutely apply. The we found that a lot of our like there's kind of a blurred line. MCP is kind of these weird, very exciting um, feature that seems to have more builders than users for now. Like everyone wants to build MCP servers. The great majority of people using agentic solutions don't care. They care
Mhm.
about the agentic capabilities. So what we're doing here is we're lowering the bar for you to create your MCP servers. We want
Mhm.
that to become super easy so that you can provide your tools, provide your features in a super easy way without having to care about all of the infrastructure. Like if you want to do a new version, so here, like my agent is ready. All right, here. You can see that I've corrected my mistake before. This is deployed again. This is production ready. Like I can have my users use it, like no problem. So I'm
Okay.
lowering the bar and I don't need to run any servers there. I
Mm.
like this is all fully managed. If I have one person using my MCP server, it works. If I have 10,000, it still works because we're going to create micro containers for each of the sessions. You can scale.
Mhm. Interesting. Is it possible to share this Jupyter notebook by any chance?
Absolutely, I'll share that as a follow-up. Absolutely no problem. There's minor modifications that I've done to the notebooks there, but they are all part of our samples. They're available on GitHub.
Mhm.
You can clone that, you can fork that, you can do whatever you want with it. It's fully available.
Cool. Thank you.
And yeah, I can again invoke again my. Yeah, I could change our invocation here. I multiply, I invoke MCP tools here. Here, yeah, we could add another one. So this is just basically using the MCP server. So that's just an MCP client. Like um, there's nothing specific to AgentCore here. It can work with any solution. The only thing is we're using parameters to identify where to call things, but that's pretty much it. So here, if I were to add like an additional step, here, if I want to be able to consume that, I would do this from right here. See? And I could do my modification. Same thing, like we could absolutely, so here, this is my MCP server. We could connect to that from our, here. Oh yeah, I need to do the bearer authentication right again. So here I have my bearer. I need to check. But that configuration that I'm doing here, you could theoretically do that from any MCP client. So I can go, all right, here. Yeah, okay. Right here, get my bearer token, and I have my bearer here. And that will be my authentication for my MCP server. Cool. Tools. Oh, I'm getting, what did I forget? Forgot something. Here. Yeah, you can you see what I mean. You can do the configuration. I'm using this as a client, but you can use you can use any MCP client that you want. Any other question when it comes to hosting MCP servers? I mean, I can show again here. So we've created two gateway. I created a third one during our demonstration, but basically the first gateway has OpenAPI as a target. The second one had a Lambda function, so we can use like define our Lambda function, define whatever we want there. What I haven't shown is we have predefined integrations. So if there are tools that you're looking to integrate with in an MCP way without having to understand their APIs and things like that, we already have predefined integrations that we can just add to your MCP server. For instance, if you have a bunch of things in Confluence, you just provide us with the API key, and you can have an MCP server that will give you access to your Confluence. Same thing with Jira. Jira is pretty popular because we have a lot of people who integrate like the user stories from Jira into their development environment. This is a great way of doing that. Same thing with PagerDuty. If you want to have the ability for your agents to actually interact with your users using PagerDuty, that's doable. ServiceNow for request management, all of that is just very easy to set up. Just define and add your API keys or your OAuth clients, add that as a target to your MCP server and you're done.
Let's see.
So very easy to set up. And then we've shown runtime. We had one running, we added a second one. The second one is right here. You can see that we've done two versions. One with the division spelled incorrectly, one with the division spelled correctly. So we really have the possibility of defining new versions and sending our customers to it super easily. If I'm unhappy with my version, I always have the possibility to do a rollback. So very easy to manage overall, and it makes it super nice for you to have your MCP servers targeting a specific usage or a specific set of users, and not have to manage all of the infrastructure under all of that. What I haven't shown is obviously we have all of the observability built in, so you're able to see within AgentCore. So I haven't specifically configured my runtime to send the traces in this particular demonstration. But if I had, you would see all of the calls, all of the traces. I can actually show that from another account. Give me a second. I'm going to share after a second. I can show you what this looks like. That's interesting to see overall. All right, cool. Going to share my screen in a sec.
And in the meantime, I put a few links in there. So there's a link to a survey for this mission. There's a recap of all the missions that we posted, just a brief uh, text recap with links to all the videos. And then there's actually a playlist of all the videos so far. And lastly, I put the GitHub repository link in there.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So here I have another account where I'm actually capturing traces. So you can see that I have my traces, currently 0 session, currently not throttling. So if I go back to my model invocation, I can see my model invocations by model. I can see all of the token-based and throttle-based and error-based elements just right there. And for AgentCore, I can see all of my agents. I can view details of my agents. I can see when I had most of my traces. I can see when I had most of my errors. And I can go into details and see what my errors were. So here, if I go into each of my sessions, I can see the different spans. And here I had a problem with authentication again. I gave it this system manager parameter that it didn't have access to, so it failed. So I can see immediately what happened there. And again, the problem was in between the keyboard and the chair. So very easy to identify when you do something wrong, which I don't know about you, but I do wrong things all the time. So having a good way of getting my traces, my logs, my metrics flowed into a dashboard that I can use for troubleshooting is a great way for me to get faster to something that actually works. All right.
Cool.
Well, that's everything that we wanted to show today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Cool. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Uh, is that Sharon again?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thanks everyone for attending again. Here's some links. I put them in the chat because it's hard to retype those things, but if you can fill out the survey, it'd be great. And then all the previous missions we've put up on YouTube in a playlist so you can see them, and this one will be added there as well. But we definitely appreciate you all attending, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks, everyone.